Hi guys, and welcome to Red Flags, a Twilight Podcast. I am going to be jumping in here for the first few episodes at the very beginning, because when we were recording, we didn't actually have a name for our podcast yet. And I also wanted to bring attention to something that we have come across in looking into different Twilight-related things while we're getting this all started up. And it's actually mthg.org, which will also be linked in our Instagram and our Twitter accounts. This is a website sort of highlighting a project going on with the Quileute tribe right now. The first step is relocating the Quileute tribal school. Right now, where they're positioned is kind of unsafe. It's not very structurally sound, and it's very sensitive to things like earthquakes and tsunamis. So they're working on a project that first includes relocating this to a safer place. If you are interested, I would highly recommend looking into, all the information that they have available on that website, even if you're just looking to learn more about the Quileute tribe, as they are featured in the Twilight books, but not necessarily accurately by any means. And so, if you're interested in doing that or looking into donating or helping out with this cause, highly recommend going to mthg.org. Alright, and let's get into the show. So it's been a while since Twilight came out when we were in middle school, and now it has come back to rear its ugly head. I'm Jay.
I'm Kait.
And we're reviewing Twilight. Stephenie Meyer recently came out. She announced that finally, after I think about 8 years since the leak of Midnight Sun, she was released.
That long ago?
I think so.
I'm old.
It's been about a decade.
No way it's been about a decade since middle school. How old are we? Hang on a second.
Well, Twilight came out
my gosh. It's been more than 8 years.
The original Twilight came out in 2007.
Okay.
But so Stephenie Meyer made her announcement that since it leaked about a decade ago, she is going to be officially publishing Midnight Sun. And I read the leak of Midnight Sun.
I did not.
And I'm so curious as to how it's going to be comparatively, because there's been 8 years to edit it. But it got me thinking about the original Twilight series and how when I was a middle schooler, I loved it for a short amount of time, and then I was forced to hate it for the rest of my life.
For the wrong reasons. Like, there are definitely reasons to have issues with this book series.
Oh, of course.
But people, when we were growing up anyway in middle school and early high school, maybe. I don't remember it being big in our early high school, to be honest. But people, kind of hated it for the wrong reasons. Because vampires sparkle. You can do whatever you want with vampires. They're not real. So that's not, a huge deal. The subtle, abusive tendencies that Edward has, the manipulation over Bella, that's kind of a red flag. And people didn't hate him because of that. They hated him because he sparkled and was a pretty boy. And I'm that's just not.
The fact that he's a century older than her.
The fact that, he's some 100-and-something-year-old man taking advantage of a 17-year-old girl.
And those are all the correct reasons to have problems with Twilight. Those aren't all of them by any means. But the reasons when we were in middle school to hate Twilight were girls liked it, vampires sparkle.
Young girls liked it, too.
It.
I would even say it's because of the age group that liked it. Pre-teens, early teens, because, our generation can't do anything right. So if our generation likes it, and, I don't know. It's kind of one of those things how people are girls and their pumpkin spice latte, it's just a flavor. It's not a big deal. And, it doesn't mean you're a certain type of person if you like it. It's the same with literature. And I feel like this was critiqued for the wrong reasons. So we're going to critique it for the right reasons and kind of address,
the things that are wrong with it, but also kind of look at it, because at least in my memory, it kind of reads pretty typically for a YA novel.
It does.
And so we're going to, sort of be looking at that. But we just thought that maybe we should start by trying to recollect what we actually know about Twilight going into it. And so where I'm coming from is I have not watched or read Twilight since probably around 2011.
I read Twilight when they first started coming out, because I remember maybe not when they first started coming out, because I read Twilight after the first movie came out. I think the first, like, I remember seeing trailers for the first movie. I found out it was a book, and I rushed to read the first book before the movie came out, and then I read the rest of the series. And then I kind of watched all of the movies as they were coming out, and my sister went through, like, a little phase a few years ago, maybe like 4-ish years ago, where she kind of watched a lot of the movies on repeat as background to study. So it's been a minute since I've really thought about Twilight at all.
Yeah, where I am, I read all of the books, but I didn't see all of the movies. The point at which I stopped being interested in Twilight was sort of in between the last 2 movies coming out. So I saw the first half of Breaking Dawn, and then I didn't see the second one. And I read all of the books, but I have come to the realization that I just don't remember pretty much anything about middle school, including these books.
So I think what we're going to do is, because we wanted to kind of be able to compare Midnight Sun to, since Jay has read the original uncut, like unedited draft, she wants to compare those and kind of go off of her memory of like how the unedited draft was versus the final product, as well as how that compares with Twilight, because hearing what she says, a lot of the things she has read from Midnight Sun, the leaked draft, does not exactly coincide with my memory of Twilight in Bella's point of view. So we're gonna go about that, but we'll also probably watch the movie after this, and maybe we can talk about the movie and how, like, after we watch, like, read this whole book, we can talk about, like, the movie too and what we notice that's different and
whatever happens there. Because what I remember from Midnight Sun, which we won't get too much into right now. Obviously, we're gonna get into it because I've just said that. But from what I remember about Midnight Sun, a lot of it is excuses for Edward's actions. And I think partially this was probably in response to
the
actual criticism being thrown at Meyer when she was, first publishing Twilight and everything. There was the wave of non-criticism, and then there was the wave of criticism of all of the things that we just said, basically. And I think this was partially in response to that. And I know that there's a reimagining where it's Beau Swan and Edith Cullen, which I have not read at all.
What names, man? What names
really
in these books? But I also want to make it clear that this isn't like meant to be a stab at Stephenie Meyer. There's nothing, like, from a literary point of view, I don't recall like her writing being bad. Like, pretty typical for YA. It's more just like, I don't know, I think, was this like one of the first books she published? You know what I mean?
This was the first book she published.
So good for her. And for all those people that made fun of her, she's sitting on a fat stack of your money that you gave her while you were criticizing all of her crap. So that's not what I meant. But just to be clear, I don't have a problem with Stephenie Meyer. I don't have a problem with her writing. I think she's come out with things since
The Host.
I'm not a particularly huge fan of her writing, but there are very few people that I would say, like, I'm a dedicated fan to this specific author. It's just a book to me. I don't know. I don't really pay too much attention to authors as I do about
the content.
Just the content. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that I just about agree. I think that from my memory, and maybe we'll be proven wrong in our reread of it, but I think that Meyer is pretty average as far as YA writing goes. It just so happens that being special in that way, and like the idea of vampires being a romantic character as opposed to a horror character, blew up during this time period.
And like, I think this was one of the first things that really got vampires back into the mainstream after Interview with a Vampire. Because before Interview with a Vampire, that's like, as far as my knowledge goes, I'm not a historian and I did not research this, so please don't quote me. I have nothing to cite. As far as my knowledge is, Interview with a Vampire is really one of the first movies it was a book first, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a
book.
Rice wrote it.
Yeah. So, but it's really one of the first creations that showed vampires as being a more romantic character. Before, they were just kind of like Dracula, this big blood-sucking, mindless thing that just wanted to kill. And this kind of showed that, like, that was kind of the first one where it was like, oh, vampires, I don't want to say have a soul because that sounds tacky, but like, they have conscience, they have emotions, they fall in love, like, they have obviously some differences, but in a lot of ways they can be much more human than they'd been portrayed in the past. And I think, I don't know, after Twilight, like, they just became so mainstream with a lot of other things, putting like that book Vampires Suck came out. If any of you know, like, Cassandra Clare's books, The City of Bones, like the Mortal Instruments books, they don't center around vampires, but they have them in them. And they're relatively, I mean, they're kind of creepy the way she portrays them, but they're like human. Like, they have feelings, they have conscious thoughts, they make decisions based off of way more than just like this need to kill and suck blood. I feel like it kind of brought a lot of stuff back to the whole vampire, like the thought that like, oh yeah, I forgot we could write vampires as romantic characters. Like,
and that's like one of those things where like Anne Rice obviously did it before Stephenie Meyer did, but I think Stephenie Meyer deserves all of the credit for bringing vampires as a humanoid character back into the mainstream, back into everything. She also almost like was very responsible for a lot of like the book industry surviving through the 2008 sort of recession going on, and so she deserves credit for that, because every publisher after that fact has Stephenie Meyer and a couple of other people to thank for a really good windfall.
But
as far as like vampires go, they were legends in a lot of different cultures about we're not understanding the bloating of the human body after it gets buried and starts decomposing. We're not aware of like the specifics of how the body works after death, and so all of these sort of things come about in relation to like vampire bats as well. And then we see Carmilla as the first real vampire story written, and that includes romance in it, but it's not the main focus of it. And then we see sort of Dracula after Vlad the Impaler, and then there's a lot of that.
Like, they're using it as horror.
Yes, there's a lot of just that going on and on and on, which there's nothing wrong with, because vampires as a horror staple is a really good thing. I think that the things that it stands for in literature, as far as like the darker parts of the human soul and these sort of primal instincts mixing in with cultural folktales, super good.
Well, it's also like there was a time where like when kids would dress up as vampires on Halloween, or even adults, it was the typical Dracula. Like, I remember as kids, I never saw a vampire costume that wasn't just like pale face painted on, meant to be scary. And then as we got into our teens, and this could be the age, because like obviously it's not appropriate to wear certain costumes when you're younger, but like even adults, I never saw it. And then as we got older and like vampires started coming back and they were more humanized and more seen as a romantic character, there became like the more romantic kind of like sexy vampire costumes of like, you know, girls that were victims of the vampire with blood running down their necks, but they were like it was meant to be more of a sexual, like, lust romance type thing, and it kind of evolved from like something that's terrifying to like something that can be
something that's still terrifying, but sort of goes into the human psyche of how we are kind of attracted to things that are macabre.
Oh yeah.
And exploring that a little bit more too, and especially I think it tells more how we're surviving storytelling wise, because as you look through history, the way that stories evolve and our focus shifts between like the very first stories have a lot to do with actions without emotion. Then we get into a good mix of action and emotion. And now at the point we're at, we're pretty heavily fixed on like emotions and intentions and what is going through a person's mind. And of course there are like action books that are still thrillers, that kind of thing, that explore more like exciting parts of that kind of thing. But I think to the big switch in werewolves, vampires, a lot of other mythical kind of folktale creatures and like just not real things, sort of is a reflection of the way we're moving, especially in Western society, the way that we're moving towards the inner working as opposed to like the outer sort of actions of a person.
It's also like, I don't know, so I feel like with every generation we become more accepting of different things that our previous generation was not as accepting of, whether it be the LGBT community, race, like our generation particularly. We're kind of like, I am the last year of millennial, I'm a cusper, so I'm like the last possible year of a millennial, but also the first possible year of Gen Z. So I don't really know where I fall in there, and I don't really care because it doesn't mean anything anyway. So, but I feel like it kind of shows how like our generation's become more accepting of things, because when vampires were first created and looked at and stuff, they were just horror, something to kill because it's different, and now it's evolved to like, oh, there's something that's different and not everyone can accept them, so they have to stay in hiding, but there are some people that can, and they can know about it.
There's also a great interest in understanding them. And there's also, I think with vampires in particular, I think because it tends to be so sexually charged, there's also a lot of projection to be had there with like people exploring their own sexual identities.
So let's talk about what we remember.
I know, like, let's jump into that.
So one thing I want to talk about first is the cover. I love the apple on the cover because it's the forbidden fruit, and Bella's kind of the forbidden fruit in this. If there's anyone that didn't get that reference to Adam and Eve,
there it is.
Edward is Eve. He's taken the forbidden fruit, and that's going to cause a huge problem in the vampire community, which we find later. But basically, he ends up facing punishment for it with the Volturi, which I don't remember if they talk about that in this one or if it's the next one. But eventually, the Volturi is like, oh, we know you're with a human now, and there are consequences. So I liked that little nod. Mm-hmm. So, what's the first thing you remember from Twilight?
The first plot point of Twilight that I remember is Bella making the move to Forks.
And she's whiny about it.
Bella is a very sulking character, is one thing I'll say that I think I'm going to have a hard time not being annoyed by this.
I loved it when I was growing up, though, because I was like, oh my god, she's miserable and misunderstood just like me. And reading this, I'm like, oh my god, she's dramatic, and I must have been dramatic too, and I have no idea how my parents raised me. Like, how did they not just smack me upside the head every day? If this is what I was into, like, I was okay with this type of whiny sulking. Like, I must have been annoying.
Well, that's the kind of thing. Like, I think she appeals very much to, like, the self-absorption of becoming a teenager. But as an adult, looking back on the way that she acted, I feel like I'm just going to have such a hard time.
She's so negative and disrespectful to her parents. She calls her mom Renee, and she calls her dad Charlie. I wouldn't be alive today if I called my parents by their first names.
So, yeah, Bella is moving to Forks, which she hates the idea of. She knows that her mother ran away from Forks at some point. And
we don't know why. They just got divorced, but I don't know why. That's another thing. Why did the mother move from, like, Forks to, Washington to Arizona, like, with her kid? Like, how does that... They don't talk about that, because they make it sound like her dad's involved, but I'm like, typically they don't just let you move out of state with your kid. One of the parents has to sign away or resign a portion, at least, of their parental rights. And they didn't talk about that at all.
Yeah, that never really gets explored as far as how the relationship between her and her father works, because she seems to hold, from my memory, she seems to hold a lot of resentment towards him for seemingly no reason.
Even though, like, yeah, like, he has pictures of her around the house, he wants her there, like, she even talks about him being involved when she's growing up, but I don't know exactly how that came about. Like, I don't know.
They go somewhere for 2 weeks on vacation. Like, she sees her dad for, like, 2 weeks out of the year, and they go on vacation together.
But before then, doesn't she see him for, like, months at a time? Didn't she used to spend, like, whole summers with him? So, like, how do you not have a relationship at all with your dad?
Not to mention, when she actually meets her dad, is that he bought her a car. And it's not a great car, and money isn't a replacement for love. But to me, that shows that he's trying very hard. At least as far as, like, the divorced dad in the situation can.
Charlie never seemed bad. And, like, from my understanding, it kind of seems like he, at least the first time I was reading it, like, he definitely cares about her and loves his daughter, but it kind of seems like he stepped back because she wanted to be with her mom. Like, she didn't want to be with him. So, like, he kind of...
Stepped back because he
was like, I'm not going to force her to.
Yeah, that, I would agree with that as well.
Like, I don't think Charlie's a bad dad, and I don't think he deserves to be called Charlie. Like, have some respect for your parents. She even does that with her mom, who she lives with full time and is her closest person to her on this planet. Like, she calls her Renee. I would never in a million years call my parents by their first names. It's like a respect thing. At least in my household. I don't know if it's different in, like, other parts of the country, if it's more common or what, but, like, not in New England, man. So, yeah, she gets the new car, and I remember her not being thrilled about the new car, but then, like, loving it when she gets in it or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Like, she ends up loving the truck.
She ends up being very attached to it.
And it's this, like, big, rusted crunk of junk, like, that she's driving around in, and...
It's a very sloppy jalopy type car.
But honestly, it's the type of car that I would kind of love to drive around in.
And we see, I think that's our first in as well with the Black family.
Yeah, Jacob and Billy Black. It's Billy Black's truck. Family friends.
We sort of get a little bit of insight into that, but it's their foreshadowing for Jacob coming in later on. And then, I don't know, I don't remember a whole lot about, like, her move-in, whether or not it was significant at all.
All I remember is that her room was unchanged from when she used to go there in the summers. Because, like, it's been years and years since she spent full summers with Charlie. And he didn't change a thing. Like, he upgraded the bed and I think the bedding. And I think that's it. Like, all of her pictures and stuff. Like, maybe he added a desk for her schoolwork because she's in high school now.
Maybe.
But, like, everything else, like, he didn't touch her room. Which I think is really sweet that, like, his daughter is basically like, you know, screw you, Dad. I'm not going to come visit you at all anymore. And he's like, well, I'm going to keep her room exactly the way she left it just in case. I'm like,
that's sweet.
Poor Charlie deserves better. Like, I'm sorry you had such a crappy daughter.
And then I think the next big thing is, like, her first day of school, right? Where
I think so.
She goes to school and somehow is the most interesting person in the world.
Even though she's not. She's, like, very bland and blah and just humbug about everything. And I remember that she sees the Cullens in the lunchroom and she has, like, chemistry or something with Edward. Huh, ironic.
But yeah, she meets, I think the two big friends that she makes are Jessica and Mike.
I think there's another girl, too. I just don't remember.
There might be.
There's another kid, like a dark-haired guy that I don't remember.
There are a bunch of other people.
That's not Jacob.
Bella doesn't remember them very well, so neither do I. And so she gets in the first day. She kind of has people falling over themselves to get to know her, even though it becomes very clear that she's so disinterested in them. I feel like from our high school perspective, I think Forks High is supposed to be about the same size as our high school. And our high school
probably smaller, because I think our high school, I don't remember exactly how many kids were in Forks High School, but I know it was small. And, like, we graduated a class of 98. Like,
72.
Kids. 72?
We had a lot of people dropping out.
But I thought those were the kids, I thought, like, including the kids that we didn't think were gonna make it, but they actually did.
We were 72.
I thought there were 98 kids that graduated with us.
But
oh my gosh.
In our school overall, it was give or take about 500 kids.
Definitely take.
But I think Forks is a comparable size, and I know, at least from my high school experience, maybe I was just unobservant, but I didn't really notice new kids all that often. I knew that they happened pretty frequently.
You noticed? I remember noticing them when we were younger. Like, because I remember,
but
I'm not going to name names, but I remember a couple new kids coming in, and they were in my class in, like, elementary school and middle school, so it was a big deal because we had a new kid in our class. Be nice to them, make them feel welcome, because we come from kind of a small cliquey town,
but not
which fares well for new kids, honestly, as long as you're...
But not in high school, though.
Yeah, because you're changing classes so much, you don't notice.
And so maybe that accounts for it, but I feel like it's very odd to me, from what I remember, how attached everybody immediately was to Bella. And upon seeing her lovely personality, how attached they continue to be.
Yeah, she's awful. She's so rude to them. But
I think her biggest, like, sin as far as friendship goes was
she drops everyone when
just
she meets the Cullens.
just that she starts ignoring them pretty heavily when she gets more involved with Jacob and Edward.
Yeah, because, you know, as a young woman, you have to be sucked into your relationship. You can't be your own person. Everything has to revolve around a guy, which is total bull, and that is one of the problems with this book that we will discuss.
She sees Edward.
Oh, yeah.
Her first encounter with him.
He hates her.
It's not good. She thinks he hates her. And I think she sees him a couple of times in situations where it's very clear that he's trying to avoid her in some way.
Well, I mean, she's miserable. I'd be avoiding her too, like the plague. You don't want to catch it.
You know, destined to be.
And then she almost gets killed by a car.
Yes,
in the school parking lot.
I think it's like one of his first days back that... No, I think it must be a little bit later because she's decided she's determined to hate him. But... so we'll see how that goes.
Does the apple thing actually... I remember the apple thing where she drops the apple. And this might be after she almost gets killed by the minivan. But, like, where she drops the apple and he, like, flips it up with his foot and catches it and hands it to her. Was that just for the sake of the movie? Or did that happen in the book?
I think that was mostly the movie. I can't remember, though. But, at some point, after he comes back, he is standing across the parking lot. A minivan rolls in on ice.
Staring at her like he does. Little creep.
A minivan comes in on ice. And then suddenly he's there. And she has a little, what the heck kind of thing.
Because he stops a van with his hand from, like, crushing her between her car and the van.
But he saves her, and she immediately points that out.
Why didn't she just, like, jump into the bed of her truck? Because she was right at the back. Wouldn't you have just kind of, like, grabbed the back of the truck and tried? Or tried to run? She just watched it, like, I don't think she saw it coming. Maybe.
I don't think so. I can't exactly remember, but I think it's one of those things where she was doing something clumsy, as per usual, because one of Bella's defining personality traits was that she was clumsy.
And it's meant to be an endearing thing, and it's just not. Like, it's just not. I don't know why clumsy girls that can't fend for themselves are seen as attractive. Like, to me, if you think that, you are a sexual predator. Go away.
That's exactly
Edward is a sexual predator.
That's it. We're there. We said it, folks. That's the whole podcast.
And we're going to continue to prove that throughout the rest of the series.
Exactly. But she goes to the hospital, and here we meet Carlisle Cullen, who is a doctor at the hospital.
Who is Edward's adopted father, who we later find out turns him against his will, but that's like
Spanish flu, what you gonna do?
Let him die. Bella would have been better off.
I mean, everybody would have been, let's be real. But we meet Carlisle Cullen, who I think corroborates the story that she hit her head hard, and that's why she's having these perceptions. But she's not really saying anything. But Edward does stick around the hospital, even though, by all intents and purposes, he does not have to.
Yeah, because he's waiting to find out if she died, so if he can like go in and just suck her dry, just rip her throat open, unscrew that dome, take a sip.
Just like a Kool-Aid jammer right there.
What?
But she confronts him in the hospital. I think she's free to go at that point. But
she didn't get hurt. Like, nothing happened to her. She's fine. She didn't need to go to the hospital at all. Unless, did she have a concussion? Now I'm second guessing.
I don't think
maybe she did get hurt.
I think it's one of those things where it was played up. Like, maybe she did hit her head, but it was played up for the purpose of making her seem less credible.
Well, also, I'm assuming people thought she, like, not Edward, because obviously he knows, but, like, other people around her didn't exactly see really well what was going on, so they assumed, like, she got hit by the car a little bit. Like, Edward pushed her really hard to get her out of the way, and, like, she hit her head on the floor, the pavement, or something.
But so she has this confrontation with Edward, and he basically tells her, I don't know what you're talking about. I was right there with you. And she goes, why would you be? You don't like me.
And then he's like, no, like, I don't think I ever said that.
He's like,
you're right, but...
He's like, I don't recall, actually. Like, I don't know.
I don't remember storming out on you that one day. Like, whatever. So then, flash forward, don't remember what happens after the hospital. And we have written down that at some point Bella goes to Seattle. She goes to the beach and meets Jacob. I don't know if her friends are surfing or if they're just spending a day on the beach, but she meets Jacob there.
There's a paragraph
and Jacob invites her to a bonfire later on.
I remember there being an in-depth paragraph about tide pools for the beach scene.
You know what? That kind of rings a bell. So we don't know exactly what order this happens in, so we're just going to talk about Seattle, beach with Jacob, bonfire. These are very limited.
We're assuming that it kind of goes in that order, just because of what happens afterwards, but it could happen in any sort of fashion. But Bella actually gets courted quite a few times for the Sadie Hawkins dance. And,
I forgot about the Sadie Hawkins dance.
And she, doesn't end up going, as far as I know. I'm not totally sure.
Okay, so you talk about how Bella ended up in Seattle and what happened when she was there. Okay. And then I'll talk about how I remember it, because we remember it different ways. And I don't know if, because I've seen the book and the movie, so I don't know if I'm confusing the book and the movie, or if she's confusing something and they take more than one trip to Seattle. Like, I'm not sure exactly how this goes down, but we remember it differently, which is really interesting.
Right. To be fair, I could be misremembering this from the original draft of Midnight Sun, because I know that changes a lot of things to excuse Edward's behavior. So, but the way that I remember the Seattle fiasco is that she refuses, I think it's 3 boys, for going to the Sadie Hawkins dance with them by telling them that she is going to go to Seattle that weekend, the weekend that the dance is going on. And Edward overhears this, or knows it in some way. There's like some sort of favor or something being controlled, and he asks her if she wants to go to Seattle with him, and he says like he's been planning to go or something like that, and so they end up going to Seattle together, in my recollection.
So in mine, I do remember she got courted for the Sadie Hawkins dance. She never asked anyone, but a couple guys made it clear they wanted to go with her. She decided not to go. Her two girlfriends, Jessica and the other one, convince her to at least go dress shopping with them. Mm-hmm. So they go into the city to try on dresses and stuff. Bella is just kind of sitting there hanging out. She decides that she wants to go to this like bookstore that's right down the street. It's not far, it's just around the corner. So she's gonna go look at books for a little bit and then she'll be back.
Is this where we find out that her favorite book is Wuthering Heights?
I have no clue.
Okay, I remember that, but I don't know where it ever comes into play.
Well, I remember she's walking to a bookstore, realized she's being followed by some dude, takes a turn down an alley, and I'm like, girl, come on. Takes a turn down an alley. He's kind of like cornering her. I don't know if there's more than one guy. I think there might be two, but I'm not positive. I could be remembering this whole thing completely incorrectly also, so I don't know. But then all of a sudden, Edward, like, knows she's in trouble and shows up and scares the guys off without, like, doing anything. He just looks at them menacingly. And I'm like, these guys have, like, knives, and, like, it was 2 against 1. They definitely would have tried something, but fine, whatever.
What are knives against his
jawline? Yeah, he has her get in the car, drives her back, offers to take her out to dinner, and her 2 little girlfriends are like, go do it, go. So then they go to dinner, and I just remember that she keeps saying, like, that, like, she knows something's off about him, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And their waitress comes, and he kind of flirts with the waitress a little bit to, like, I remember her using the word a lot to, like, compel. He'll compel people to do things. He can't control them, but he compels them to do things with his charm. And, like, she blushes a lot and stuff, but, like, he's like, oh, yeah, I'll take you out to eat. And then he drives her home, and she's terrified of his driving. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, we can turn the heat on. And they both because she's freezing. They both reach for the heat at the same time, and their hands touch. And she's like, oh, my God, your skin is ice cold. And he's like, yeah, it's winter, it's fine. Like,
see, I don't remember any of that. Do you remember, does he eat anything in the restaurant? Because I know that when they're at lunch in like the school lunchroom, there's a big hullabaloo about how what they have on their trays are always just props and they never touch them.
Yeah, and he eats something and then has to go cough it up later.
Does he? Okay, I don't remember that.
See, maybe I did read part of Midnight Sun.
Maybe.
But anyway, that's the lunchroom, because I know in the lunchroom, he, like, after she knows he's a vampire, he demonstrates, like, yeah, sure, I can eat if I want to, and he takes a bite of pizza. And maybe I did read, like, the first few chapters of Midnight Sun, because I just remember Edward's, like, thought very clearly, great, now I have to go hack this up later.
Like, oh my lord.
But no, the first time he takes her out to eat, he just, like, she orders like ravioli or something, and he just sits there and watches her eat. Like, it's really awkward.
Very off-putting. Okay. Because, yeah, see, my memory of Seattle ends at they go to Seattle together. And so I don't remember anything about the actual events taking place in Seattle. So
I just remember the way he asked, like, oh, can I take you out to dinner, was such a weird way, because he's like, oh, are you hungry? And she's like, I guess so. And he's like, I want to take you to eat. Like, I want to bring you so that you can eat. And it's just like, okay.
A spectacle for
and he just watches her eat, and it's just really weird. And her girlfriends are just like, okay, bye, Bella. Hopefully we see you Monday and you don't get murdered out here.
None of them know really anything about the Cullens.
Except that they're weird and they all date each other.
Yeah, like, they're aloof, and that's about all they know. And so why would you be like, oh, Edward is hot, so it's fine?
Yeah, because no hot guys are creeps, right? Isn't that how all college frat parties go? They're all great.
We all know that Ted Bundy was an upstanding citizen. Nothing wrong. Maybe before this, but I think afterwards we get a beach scene where she meets Jacob.
I think it's after, but I'm not positive.
Maybe.
Because I feel like the beach scene either comes after this or it comes before the car scene, in the middle of like Edward being gone for that week or two after her first meeting him.
Maybe. I'm not totally sure.
I have no idea.
But in any case, I think it must be afterwards, because isn't he invited to go and he makes up an excuse about why he can't?
Yeah, I think they're going surfing or something.
And he says that he can't go. And we find out from Jacob that it's because
the Cullens aren't allowed on their reservation.
There's a restraining
They're banned.
There's a restraining order. But I think he makes up an excuse about it, doesn't he? So
about,
at that
my
point,
family's going hiking because they go hiking on nice days or something.
Because I think that must be after that, because I don't know. In my mind, there would be no reason really for them to talk at a good length until after Seattle.
Which,
so they go to the
super
beach.
creepy that you followed her to Seattle, but we can talk about that in our next video. Sorry for all the stuff you guys hear in the background. I don't even notice that I'm, like, sitting here, like...
scribbling. But
so, yeah, goes to the beach, meets Jacob. He's like your best friend's little brother. He's like a little cutie, a little bit of a nuisance. Like, I remember,
got long hair.
Yeah, I remember one of my friends growing up, her little brother used to kiss my hand whenever he saw me, and it was really cute. And I'm like, I'm way too old for you. But it was really cute to have someone follow you around like that. And that's kind of how I see Jacob when she first meets him.
And does she remember Jacob at all? Because I know that her dad and Billy Black are sort of acquaintances.
They're friends. Like,
Yeah.
I think they're long-term friends. They used to go fishing, hiking, hunting.
Is Billy the one who's in a wheelchair?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I could not remember.
I don't know
that
how he
there's-
ended up in it, though.
I know that there's an older gentleman in a wheelchair at some point in the movie, because I
Billy.
remember the scene, but I wasn't sure if it was him or not. But
I don't remember how he got in the wheelchair, though.
When she meets Jacob, is there any recollection of him from her childhood then?
I have no idea. For some reason, I feel like she mentioned something about playing in a sandbox, but that could be literally anything else.
Okay. She, I think, corners Jacob while he's there and asks about the Cullens. And
Or
I'm
they
not
come up
sure-
somehow.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how it comes up, but I think either she is led to believe that there's more to the story in some way, or like
About how, like, he acted like Edward Cullen was invited, but, like, he acted super weird when I asked if he wanted to come.
something like that.
And Jacob's like, yeah, the Cullens suck, and, like, we have a treaty against them coming here. Surprise!
But yeah, so Bella essentially makes Jacob say why the Cullens are, like, why either they don't get along or why the Cullens can't go there. And he brings up a legend about vampires and says that it's a legend that the Cullens are vampires.
And I don't even think he uses the exact words of, like, there's, like, they're vampires, but I think he says... I think he alludes to it like, oh, these creatures that suck blood, or like these creatures that like are evil. Like, I don't think he outright says, oh yeah, the Cullens are vampires. So like my wolf pack was like, hey,
You can't do that.
You can't come.
Now, I'm sure that he must be a little bit more secretive about it, but it is enough information to make Bella convinced that this is the truth.
Well, and I don't think it's this one. I think that gets her started in her research, but he invites her to a bonfire because they're on a Native American reservation, which I find it... I don't think Stephanie Meyer used the word Native American reservation. I think she used Indian, which is interesting to me.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like, it's a little bit iffy that the Native Americans specifically have animalistic tendencies of being werewolves. That itself is a little bit icky.
A lot of, like, things do that, though.
Yes. And
always
as far as I know,
in literature, Native Americans specifically are picked to be werewolves.
But yeah.
Don't quote us on
Native
anything, please.
Americans being animalistic is gross.
Yeah. But I think, like, he kind of says that, like, the Cullens are weird and they're not allowed here. And, like, according to his ancestors, there's a treaty. And then he tells her, like, oh, yeah, we're having a bonfire. Like, I don't know if it's tonight or Friday night or whenever, but, like, we will have a bonfire and our elders tell stories. And at this point, Jacob's doesn't know that he's a wolf yet. So, like, he's still skeptical, like, oh, yeah, our elders tell us these stories. Like, far-fetched, they're kind of crazy, you know? And then I know Bella ends up going to this bonfire where they tell this story, and I believe it's just of like one of their reservations. It has to do with a woman specifically whose like kids and husband are killed, and then like, or they're about to be killed, so she like stabs herself in the stomach to sacrifice herself, and it sends Bella on this weird like trip of like, oh my god, you have to sacrifice yourself, and like how she's gonna be a martyr somehow, and like I don't know exactly how it played in. Like I think that comes up when those vampires are like coming after her at the end of the book. I think she like thinks back to like the story that one of the elders, I don't know if it's Billy Black specifically, but one of the elders tells where the woman like stabs herself in the stomach to sacrifice herself for the rest of her reservation to get away. And Bella's like, I'm gonna do that and lead this thing that is definitely gonna kill me away from these people that can definitely kill one vampire, because there are like 7 Cullens. She's so stupid. I'm sorry.
I mean, yeah.
But anyway, back to that. So that's what I remember from the bonfire. And and the little kid, kid, the younger guy. I can't remember his name. And his sister that's Laura.
Something like that.
Laura something? It's La something, I think. Watch it be like Patricia or Sasha. But I think it's different. La something. Mm-hmm. And his name is? I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I remember that I liked him.
Yeah. Wasn't there like a whole thing? I'm pretty sure this comes up later, but there's a whole question about like somebody having a bite mark. And it's part of like Bella's reasoning on whether or not she's eventually going to be choosing Jacob or Edward, of like, oh, if you're involved with a werewolf, you will get hurt.
If you're involved with a vampire, you die.
Exactly. That's the whole thing.
Because the pack leader, he ends up being the pack leader, but he's not yet. And I think this might be addressed in the second book, but I'm not positive. Her face, half of her face is torn off. And like, it's unfortunate. The main, not Jacob, but the other boy kid that we know, his older sister, has the face that's like half really scarred. And it's because Sam ends up being the pack leader. He was with her. He loved her. He freaked out and hurt her, and it sucked. But he was with this kid's sister. What's her name? Lauren, Louise. Elle. He was with Elle. And he ended up leaving her because he imprinted on another girl. Like, he was in love with her. They were in love. And then he's like, actually, I'm sorry. My little wolfy instincts say I gotta be with this one over here. So
that one's mine. Yeah.
That might be the second book. I don't know.
I have no idea.
It's addressed, at least.
The bonfire, to me, is very fuzzy anyways, because I know that it takes place.
I know I got bored and kind of skimmed it.
A little bit. I feel really bad about a lot of, like, the Jacob-centric things, because in my middle school days, I was Team Edward.
I think I'm going to be more interested in Jacob's, like, in the stories and stuff now.
I think I'm going to be more interested in him now. I think he's, like, overall, like, a more level-headed person, or, like, more reasonable person than Edward is. But
he's not stalking Bella.
Yes. I don't think that I outwardly support Bella being with either of them in this day and age, but when I was in middle school, I was pro-Edward, I was Team Edward, and so I didn't care about Jacob's scenes at all.
Well, a lot of things Edward did, like, in middle school, I was impressionable. I thought they were romantic, and Bella was impressionable too. And now looking back, I'm like, if you wake up to some random guy staring at you while you're sleeping, that's not good. No. If he doesn't want you to hang out with your friends, specifically another guy friend that you had before him, not good.
Red flag.
Like, it's one thing if it's, like, an ex and they're like, I'm not super comfortable with you being alone. Mm-hmm. But, like...
isolating somebody is manipulative.
Yeah, and Jacob was all Bella had, really. Mm-hmm. Like, he was, like, her ride or die. She didn't get along with much other people. And Edward tried to take that away. And it's because he's worried she'll get hurt. Mm-hmm. So in that, I'm like, I understand. He's worried about her. But part of me is also like, okay, so, like, Bella's family is intertwined with Jacob's family. Mm-hmm. None of them have ever gotten hurt. And, like, Edward... you're more likely to kill her than Jacob is, dude. Like, you need to
chill.
You need to. He should have stayed gone. Like, he should have walked out into the sun with the Volturi in book 2.
In book 2. Does she find out that he is watching her sleep after she finds out he's a vampire, or before?
I think it must be after, because before it's just like, how would he have gotten into my room?
True.
And, like, the whole mind reading thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, he can't read her mind.
I know, but he ends up saying that. And then she's like, oh, why? He's like, you talk in your sleep.
Weird.
But I think it's after. I think it has to be after.
Mm-hmm. But so, I think the next big-ish scene is her confronting Edward.
If we're going in chronological order, because that could have happened anywhere between Seattle and her talking to Jacob. I think she met Jacob first, but I'm not positive.
I think she has to have talked to Jacob first, and then she confronts Edward. Because in my mind, how else would she know to confront him if she hadn't heard those stories?
And then she follows this guy that she knows is stalking her, because she even says, what, is he following me? When Like, he saves her or brings her to Seattle. Either saves her or brings her. Depends on your interpretation of the book, I guess. We just don't know exactly what happened. But I do remember her thinking at one point, like, how did he know I was here? Did he follow me? And so she ends up, like, following this guy into the woods, deep into the woods, when she is trying to ask him if he's, like, this big, horrific predator. And I'm just like, dude, what is she doing? Like,
no self-preservation.
Darwinism at its finest.
And then we have the iconic dramatic scene where he tells her that she has to say what he is.
Say it out loud.
What?
Say it.
Vampire.
Are you afraid?
No. And so yeah, she has this whole, that's like one of the most dramatic scenes in the book, and then it leads into the scene that I think is famous for being the first scene that Meyer ever thought of, which is the meadow.
Oh, maybe she did. Like, she had like a dream or something,
Well,
or had a thought.
That's my remembering
Of
of
this
it,
boy
and
sparkling.
maybe that's totally like publishing bull, but she had like a dream of him in the meadow laying with her, and I think that's like the scene that started the Twilight books.
And then she kind of like did everything around that scene. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. But so they're in the meadow. I think this is when she has her existential sort of questions. And I don't think she voices them to Edward, but this existential question of like seeing herself as an older person and being with him as a 17-year-old.
Yeah, that might be this book. It might be the next one. It might be the fourth one. We don't know exactly where it happens, but it happens.
I think she has like a concrete dream about it, but I think
that's in the second or third one that she has the concrete dream about
But
it.
I think she does think about it in the first book, at the very least.
Well,
because
it leads into, not aging.
Yeah, it leads into, I think, her ultimate decision at the end of book 1, which we'll get to a little bit, but...
I think it has to do with the power behind the vampires that she's really attracted to, and she wants to be like that.
Like, she wants to be in control. Because I think a lot of, like, the way that... This is one of those things where I have a little bit of an issue with, like, the way that it actually was written, because the way it could have been written is a lot about control, where, like, she has no control in her life, or she perceives herself to have no control in her life with, you know, her parents' divorce, the way that she's been bounced around, the way that she is bouncing around, but ultimately
the way that she literally can't even control her own limbs and, like,
basically
slips on ice and almost dies
in a lot of ways. She's completely in control, and so I wish that had been done a little bit better, because I think it would thematically make a little bit more sense and make the story make a little bit more sense, but still a beat.
Hindsight 2020.
Yeah, you know.
At some point, Edward invites her over for dinner, and I don't know, in the movie, I think Edward's going, do you want to come to dinner? But I think in the book, it might be Alice that invites her over, because I don't think Edward wants her to come to his house.
Isn't Alice super excited to be friends with Bella?
Yeah, Alice is super cute in the whole thing.
I love Alice.
She's the only good character.
I remember really liking Alice and Jasper together, but looking back on it, I'm like, oh, Jasper was a Confederate soldier. I don't know how much that speaks.
A Confederate war, like, freaking just killed everyone, because he can manipulate emotions, right?
Yes.
He was just like a killing machine. He didn't care what side he was on. He didn't care who he was killing for. As long as someone was like, hey, go kill this person, he's like, sounds good.
Basically.
And I think Victoria manipulated him.
I think so. But I don't know how much that speaks to his actual personality, because I don't know how much of his personality I actually knew. I know that I found the actor who played him attractive, but I think there was some reason that I liked Jasper, but I liked Alice as well. She's very, like...
I think I liked Jasper just because he was, like, really chill.
This is true. He was chill. But yeah, so she goes to dinner at the Cullens. There's the piano scene.
Oh, I do remember. I don't know if this is happened in the book or if I'm just thinking of the movie, but when, like, they're like, oh yeah, we made you dinner, and she's like, oh, I already ate, and Rosalie gets so mad, and she's like, I just know you guys, like, they were all excited to be cooking dinner for her too, because they have no reason to cook anymore, and, like, Esme loves cooking, and, like, Carlisle loves cooking and whatever, and they made her this big meal, and she's like, I ate, because, like, I know you guys don't eat, and Rosalie's just like, well, that's just great.
Yeah, Rosalie was so mean. I just remember.
I mean, to be fair, what business does Edward have bringing this human in, showing her their world when, like, they're so vulnerable and it could go so badly for them if it were to get out? And she's just like, this is just, like, something that shouldn't be happening at all right now. It's not. To them, like, they're supposed to be vampires. I do remember this from a lot of, like, other vampires, not the Cullens. They kind of more value humans than anything. But other vampires they're supposed to think that they're above humans. Humans are weak. They're these little, like, mouse things. Like, it's the equivalent of, like, I picture it like Rosalie's a mom. Edward's just, like, this guy that lives with her, like, a roommate or whatever. And he's just bringing home, like, this little pet rat for, like, her kids, and she's like, what, get it out of here. Like, I don't want to have to feed it. I don't want it near me. You're gonna let it loose. Get it out.
Which is ironic because she's the one who makes, like, kind of the cutthroat decision that we'll see a little bit later, but, like, she makes that decision. She helps Bella make that decision.
Well, she's jealous because I don't know if this is in the first book or the second. I don't know when anything happens, but I know Rosalie eventually ends up saying, like, I didn't want to be a vampire. I would give anything to be in your shoes, and, like, the thought of, like, her being around us and given the option to just throw that away is disgusting to me. It shouldn't even be an option. She shouldn't be here. And that might be the second or third book.
Where it's like, join the club, Rosalie. Edward is the king of melodrama regarding him being a vampire. And he's still cool with it. Like, you just have to learn how to chill every once in a while.
I mean, to be fair, if I had that decision taken from me and, like, I had my mortality taken and there was someone in front of me that had their whole life ahead of them that could make different choices, I'd be like, what are you doing?
That's true. But I feel like...
Because, like, you have to watch everyone you love die.
The way that she handled it was incredibly poor. That's my only thing.
I mean, Bella and Edward handled their entire relationship was incredibly poor.
I feel like nobody in this...
These characters also...
Yeah, nobody has common sense in these
I like
books.
Emmett. He's funny, at least.
Yeah.
So there's dinner. Edward plays the piano. I remember that. And they jump out of, like, a window and climb trees or something at some point.
It's a romantic evening.
Oh, I remember her commenting that, like, Edward doesn't have a bed in his room. Because he doesn't sleep. He's like, what were you expecting? She's like, I don't know, like a coffin or something.
And those parts, I think, are, like the more humorous parts, I think I will enjoy.
Very far and few humorous parts.
I feel like I'm going to enjoy those a lot this time around because the way that I view Twilight is sort of a humorous piece at this point in time.
I feel like I'm really going to enjoy, like, Charlie's interactions with people because he's so uncomfortable when people show emotions, and that's, like, me. So, like, Bella being like, oh, I love you, Dad, and him just being like, yeah,
cool,
yep, same. Like, I feel like I'm just gonna really get it. Bella gets invited to a baseball game with the Cullens because it's a thunderstorm, and they can only play during thunder because they hit the ball so hard, it's so loud, crack.
Also, why do they want to play specifically baseball? That's my only question. I understand the concept of, like, the things that we do are so strong and the way that we go about them is too much, so we have to be careful about the activities we choose. Why is baseball their game of choice?
Like, why not soccer?
Why
or
not
like
literally
croquet?
Anything? Their whole thing is just like, we play baseball together. And it's like, are you a little league team? What's going on?
Well, they can't be.
And I think there's also a tie-in because isn't Bella's mom's boyfriend a ball player?
I have no clue.
I think he is. I'm not totally sure, but I think that was like one of those weird little, thinking back to my human life kind of thing. I honestly don't remember.
I just know that, like, Bella learns more about their abilities, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And those other vampires show up, and it's like a big yikes. I can't remember all of their names. There's
James.
Yeah, there's James, who has, like, the ponytail. There's Victoria, and there's another guy with dreadlocks. And they're like, oh, can we play? And the Cullens are like, sure, I guess. And then the wind blows, and James smells human, and he goes ballistic, and the other two have to hold him back. And then they're like, we're actually just gonna skip town. And then Edward, all of a sudden, because he can read minds, so I guess it's not all of a sudden now that I think of it. He's like, he's a hunter. He's gonna come back. Like, he likes the game of hunting. He's a hunter. So then they have to hide Bella.
They send her with Alice because Alice can see the future. And I think the reasoning behind sending her with Alice is that Alice will be able to tell if danger is on the way.
And I know Alice sees, like, this vampire in a ballet studio. Mm-hmm. And I think Bella says she's going to go to the bathroom. Because I think she's with Alice and Jasper. And I think she asks Jasper specifically to walk her to the bathroom because he can't go in. Mm-hmm. And I think she climbs out the window or something to go to the ballet studio because she's got to be a martyr. She's stupid. Well, I'm like, okay, so like send the 6 other vampires to this ballet studio to take out the one vampire, and the stupid humans like, I'm just gonna go and sacrifice myself.
Right.
So nothing bad happens to the Cullens. And I'm like,
They're superhuman.
There are literally like 8 of the Cullens and just one of this guy. They could take him out real easy.
It would be easy. But she decides she has to go. Does James call and threaten something about like her mom or her dad or something?
He might leave a note or something. I feel like he says something about one of her parents, but I don't remember.
Okay. Or maybe that was just for the sake of the movie. It's hard to tell. But she goes there. James does beat her down. There is a smackdown occurring.
And then he bites her, and Edward comes in.
And Edward, who this whole time, I think he explains to her at one point that like her scent is irresistible to him, and that
Which is like, that's great that that's what's attractive. You want to eat me for lunch. I am a literal snack for you.
It's a real B-Stars situation for anybody who's seen that. So,
yeah. That's like the relationship I have with pizza. Yeah. I'm like, I just can't, like, I'm sitting next to this pizza in class because I just can't not have it. Yeah.
It's so weird.
Meanwhile, Edward's beating this guy. His pizza's twitching on the floor because she's been bitten.
But so I think Edward does make that point though, that like she's irresistible, and
I think everyone else kind of smells it too, that like she smells really good for a human.
Specifically that like him being around her and not hurting her takes a lot of self-control, and so that's why it's a big deal that she gets bitten, because now she has venom in her, and is she just gonna flat out die? Or
she'll die and then turn into a vampire. Yes. Like, it'll kill her first, and then she'll turn into a vampire, I think.
Yes. And so, it's a big deal because Edward's like, oh my god, I have to suck the venom out like it's a snake.
No, okay. His whole family's there. He did not have to be the one to suck the venom out. And Carlisle specifically was like, you have to do it. And I'm like, Carlisle, you have done this. You have turned 7 other people. Why does Edward have to do this? Why can't Carlisle just be like, sip, sip, she's good?
I think the sentiment behind it is like, Edward needs to learn his own boundaries or whatever. But it's just a stupid
like, you're playing around with a girl's life, and like, he's screaming like, Edward, you're killing her. You're killing her. Yeah. And Edward's like, all right, cool. Sip, sip, like a fine wine.
Yeah. He's like, I'm here with my juice box. What do you want? And so
Buddy stops.
Edward stops himself. She's fine. She does have a broken leg, but she's fine.
Oh yeah, that was a big thing. Mm-hmm. Well, like for some reason, I remember him like breaking her femur. Like it said like her thigh, or like in the movie it showed him like kind of breaking her femur. Maybe she had a glass shard. But then like she's got like a walking cast, like a boot. And I'm like, she didn't break her femur. Like, I don't know.
I think at that point, things kind of go back to normal. And then Edward asks her to prom.
If he even asks her.
I don't know. They go to prom together. We see that.
They're on a gazebo by themselves that miraculously no one else wants to be out at.
And take pictures at. Yeah,
that gazebo would be packed in real life. It's both.
They go to the gazebo. She's like stepping on his feet. And maybe that's just for the sake of the movie, for like the visual of it.
I think they said it in the book too, though, because she couldn't move well because she's broken. Because she has a broken leg.
And so she's like, you know, dancing on his feet or whatever.
Oh, and Charlie's not a fan because she has to break Charlie's heart and say, like, I don't love you. I don't want to be with you. I just want to go home. And then leaves. And then comes, like, he finds she's in the hospital with the Cullens. And so, like, he's not a fan of the Cullens after
His association is like, oh, my daughter ran away and they have something to do with it. And to be fair, he is correct.
Yeah.
But so they go to prom. They're in the gazebo. And this is, I think, where she says she wants to become a vampire. She's like, my mind is made up.
For some reason, I have this like image in my head of like the last few words having something to do with like, I know what I want and like I'll get it someday or something like that. Like, I know what I want. Whatever.
And the only thing I can imagine,
and I'm like, you're 17. No, you don't.
I know Edward is horrified and he's like, that'll never happen or something like that. But in his mind, I feel like he must be thinking, well, fat lot of good that did for me to suck the venom out of you then if you want to be a vampire.
Should've just let you die.
Like, I mean, Jesus, dude. Like, I feel like in his mind, he must be like, oh, great, cool. I'm glad I did that for nothing.
Not for nothing. He cares about her humanity.
Oh, yeah. Edward thinks he's like this horrible, horrible monster for for all of the wrong, because the way
he never
I
respects her
picture
choices.
The way that I picture it, the things that Edward is a monster for include stalking, gaslighting, and manipulating people. He views himself
as well as not valuing Bella's desires at all. And I'm not saying like the first time he has to be like, all right, I'll turn you into a vampire and be with you forever. That's a huge commitment.
He doesn't even consider it. And he's just like, it's off the table completely. You have no say in this kind of thing. And it's like, well, at that point, how much of it...
she had no say in the fact that you were taking her to prom, or the fact that you were taking her out to eat that one time, or every time she wanted to go hang out with Jacob, which might be the later books, but
maybe.
He's like really possessive of her, and I don't like it.
But the reason that he thinks he's a monster is because he's a vampire, and he like has killed people, which is monstrous in and of itself.
He killed bad people, though. Like, he did the cops a favor.
It's been something like 70 years since he did anything like that. And I know that there's no timeline for when it's okay to have killed a person, but at some point you have to, like, grow up a little bit, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if his brain is just stuck at 17 or what, but he has this idea in his mind that he's just like the darkest creature in the world. How could anybody love me?
He is, because he's manipulating and stalking a 17-year-old girl.
Well, that's the thing, but it's like in his mind he's like, the only problem is that I'm a vampire, and it's like, no, the only problem is that you
treat people like crap.
Exactly. It's like, all right, dude. But so I think that's
all I remember.
That's our recollection of the first Twilight book. We're going to start going into more detail. Like, we're going to read through the Twilight book.
And read a couple chapters and talk about them at a time.
Yeah, and sort of talk about the events, talk about maybe a little bit about the writing, things like that, and see sort of where we're at now as far as our feelings on it and whether or not we feel strongly one way or the other about whether we love or hate it.
Oh, I know. I'm going to feel strongly.
And so we're going to start doing that. And then Midnight Sun is going to come out in a couple of months at this point. So hopefully we'll be done with Twilight at that point. Our plans for the future sort of to go into Midnight Sun, sort of review it against its original counterpart, as well as Twilight, and kind of go from there. So if you are back in the Twilight Renaissance with us, please
join us. I'm sorry about the noise. Please join us.
Please join us. Hey guys, Jay jumping in here again. Just wanted to say, if you enjoyed what you heard today, or if you're interested in hearing more from us, please feel free to follow us if you can, wherever you're listening to this podcast right now, as well as on Instagram and Twitter at redflagsatp. Thank you so much.
Next time
on this podcast that we haven't named yet.